Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk podcast. Back in with you guys for another show to break down another Arsenal week without a victory, which is becoming rather regular these days. 9 unbelievable games without a win. It could become 10 tomorrow. We'll just have to wait and see till then. Obviously, we usually record the podcast the day after a game or on the same day, but as I discussed in this morning's preview show, I am in the process of moving, and moving means that I will not have internet for about a week. Yes, imagine that. I think you probably can't in the 21st century not having internet for a week, but that's going to be my life. So apologies about the lacking of uploads next week. But so I thought we'd get in early, get the podcast done, talk about Brighton, have a look ahead to West Ham and the whole of the news that's been dropping this weekend too in terms of transfers and coaches, and then you'll get a raw reaction show. Which could be a little bit sketchy, but we'll see how things go after the West Ham game. But I'm joined by three brilliant people. Oh, well, two brilliant people and Webby. So how you doing, Webster? You good?
Good, mate. Doing really well, thanks. Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me on after another fantastic week of football.
You should explain what happened last week. Why? Because people were asking, where's Webster? He's meant to be on this show and he's not here.
I had a bit of a nightmare. I lost or had stolen my gym bag with my phone in it and my keys. So I walked back and I couldn't get in because I had no keys and the missus was out with the kids. And then I went round the father and mother-in-laws to get the keys and they were out. So I was locked out of the house for about 2 hours. I think I messaged you about 10:30 or something, full of apologies, but it was a bad night. A bad night.
It does sound like it, mate. It does sound like it. But to be fair, all I can think is that in that moment when you've lost your keys and your phone and everything, or you're sitting there going, oh my God, I'm not going to get on the Gooner Talk podcast. That is the only thing running through your mind in that moment. But,
yeah,
you're here now. You're here now. Yeah, your hands can stop.
Yeah, that was definitely what was going through my
mind. Raph, mate, obviously great to have you back. You were one of our original debutants when I sort of set up this push to try and get new people on the show, and you smashed it the first and the second, and now you're back for your third time. How you doing, pal?
Yeah, not too bad. Hopefully third time's better than the last two, even though the last two were good. But yeah, I'm all right. Not too bad. Just try not to drink myself to oblivion because of these, because of my lovely team.
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone, it's fair to say. Probably not alone in trying to drink yourself to death. But in terms of an Arsenal prospect, you can't really be... You can't... I can hear in my own headset. Is my mic really that bad right now?
It is a bit fuzzy.
Yeah. It's a bit fuzzy. Okay, we'll see if we can change that in a second. But I will introduce my third guest. Tom making his debut this week. How you doing, mate?
Good evening, guys. Really, really good. It's actually weird to be celebrating a Sunday night sporting victory, but it's not Arsenal. It was Anthony Joshua. So it felt like a win, and it's actually been so long since we've had a win. I'm just going to claim that. So, yeah, buzzing this weekend.
Yeah, no, it was one of those things. Like Arsenal, afterwards, there was sort of backlash on the airwaves about, was it a boring fight or was it good for me? He did exactly what he needed to do and he got the win, and that's what matters. But that's certainly something that Arsenal haven't been able to... Yeah, certainly something Arsenal. But Webster, I'll start with you, mate. We got to sort of reflect on the Brighton game because we haven't had a podcast since then. Losing 2-1 at home to a team that hadn't, I believe, won in their last 4 Premier League away fixtures. We just keep letting teams end their streaks, but we can't seem to end our own. What do you put that down to?
I guess it's just morale and form. Form is an awful thing, you know, when it's going against you. But I actually had tickets to the game and I got held up at work. So I was gutted that I couldn't make it because I really wanted to see like the first game home with Freddie in charge. I thought it could be like kind of a really memorable occasion. And it was memorable, all right, but for all the wrong reasons. I just think that the team is just on such a downer at the moment. I think half the team has got 1 foot out the door. So when you get to that sort of point as the pinnacle of football at the top level, you have to be on your game. And Brighton, you know, they're no pushovers. No team anymore are pushovers. You know, it's not it's not like 15 years ago where there was like the top 3 or 4 teams and everyone else was pretty wafty. Everyone can compete in our league, and we got punished severely.
We did. And Raph, again, Freddie sort of set up in this way that it wasn't really to people's taste. We saw Socrates come back in, still no sign of holding in this lineup whatsoever. He persisted with leaving Pepe on the bench and going with a front two of Alba and Laka. And what are you sort of seeing this now as him just being stubborn and implementing what he wants to, or is it like just the fact that we're so sort of on this hype that we need to play 4-3-3 that it's going to frustrate the fans to no end, and we can't really see past anything unless it's that 3?
I think it's a mixture of things, but I'll be honest, it hasn't filled me with confidence about Freddie. I really wanted him to do well, and get us back to kind of winning ways, but the way he's set up's been really confusing. It's not, the funniest thing is it actually is kind of 4-3-3, but he's playing Ozil on the left, which is really confusing. He's playing Abra on the right, which kind of prohibits him from being able to cut in and be as effective in scoring. If you look at the goals that he scored against Norwich, well, the goal that he scored at Norwich, he was actually coming from the left, and obviously he's got the rebound. It's just more natural to him to be able to cut in and be a goal threat. When he's on the right, he looks a little bit, he's trying. I'll definitely give Aubameyang that he's trying, but I just don't think it suits him. I don't think that we were set up in a way to actually control the ball, dictate the tempo in any way. I think his persistence with Willock, I mean, I appreciate that he really likes, he worked with him through the youth team and he believes in him, but it's not working. I think maybe he's not able to dictate the tempo in any way. And I just think that the Brighton game just showed how alarmingly bad we've got in a lot of levels. If you look at the way that we were trying to play out from the back, Brighton was squeezing us into the corners. I don't know why I let Louise and Socrates take so long when they play out from the back anyway. So it allows teams to eventually just crouch forward, and then press. And then when it gets to the side, we'll play down the line. Bellerin will play down the line. And then you're having a defender on, maybe a striker's back, holding up, goes up for a throw. Then you see them keep the ball like we should be able to keep the ball. There's a lot of things that's gone on in these last couple of games under Freddie that has been really alarming. And I don't think it's just the fact that we want him to play a certain way. I think the way that we want him to play is the obvious way to play, if I'm honest. I think with the players that we have, the reality is that we don't have probably the best balance for us is Xhaka and Torreira deep, and Ozil as a number 10 in terms of going forward and defending potentially, and to play with someone like a Pepe or a Martinelli, to be honest, which offers us something else, just something else. Another option, not only just to score, but even to create chances. You saw when Pepe came on, he was committing people, and that made Brighton kind of, their shape had to be a little bit all over the place. We scored, we created chances, and I just think it's just obvious. And I just don't understand why Freddie persisted with Ozil on the left, which is, to be honest, let's be honest, he's pretty ineffective wide, and Willock, who had a pretty poor game at Norwich and had a worse game at Brighton, to be honest. So it's just a lot of baffling things, and I think the balance wise are probably a little bit controversial, but it may even be that we have to take Lacazette out of the team and play Martinelli and Pepe and give Aubameyang the license to actually play up front, because I just think he's a bit wasted, and he's our best striker in terms of scoring goals and stuff. So I think there's things that Ljungberg could have done that he hasn't done, and that's pretty concerning.
Tom, the backlash from fans has been huge since Emery's left, and then seeing these 2 games. I mean, #Freddie out was already going after the draw away at Norwich, and I mean, in that moment, and you're looking at that, is it really acceptable to be having that instance and that amount of backlash when he's only had less than a week when this game turned up to play 2 games? How much of an impact could he have had?
Yeah, I think the thing is that he was part of the prior regime. So, he was in training week in, week out since the summer, since he moved up from the under-23s to the senior team to be assistant head coach. So, he's been part of the system, and they've obviously had a plan in place from the start of the season of what they wanted to do. And he's been part of the process. They've been trying to figure out that plan. So I think it's difficult for him to completely extricate himself from those decisions and, go for something completely new, because, logic would dictate that he was part of those processes of trying to get these players into the team, how the previous coaches saw it. So normally, I guess what you'd expect from another coach is to have a new coach bounce with a new team and a new lineup. But like I said, I think he's been part of that process.
I think the process is going to be one that needs to be given time if you want to see any sort of impact. But we know there's one thing that Arsenal fans don't have, it's patience in the world of social media. Do you think that, Tom, there can be any sort of... I mean, the obvious question is probably to say, how long do you think it is until there's full-on exodus from the Emirates because fans are so sick of what they're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a shame because obviously we all love Freddie. He's an Arsenal legend. And, we all wanted him to do well. But I think it's not really the fans are really upset with him. I think there's just more frustration at the regime in terms of the management structure of the club, the ownership structure, and, lashing out at the players and the manager. They're just the closest point of contact. So I don't think it's anything personal against him. I think it's just he's the easiest person to target. So I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong, but it's understandable. Like, the fans are paying to go and watch us play and, we're not performing. So I don't believe it's right, some of the abuse that the players and the manager, former and now current, have been getting, but it is understandable. I would like him to make some, bold choices. I think he could have been more bold, if I'm being slightly critical, in some of his lineups. I think, George Graham did a cull of a lot of, some of the stars, shall we say, of his era when they needed to make a change in the team. And I think we're crying out for a cull. I think a lot of the problems that we're having is just purely down to work ethic. And, it's our best teams of the past. I think that, when we look at our invincible team, if they needed to mix it, they could mix it. When they needed to play rough, they could play rough. But when they wanted to play sexy football, they could do it better than anyone. So it's very strange to see an Arsenal team who, okay, if the football is not really going well, we're not clicking in our combinations, but we don't have the fight to mix it. That's something which is not part of the Arsenal DNA. And I think that's what's really frustrating fans. So, and I think the normal, kind of way to get around that is by, being a bit brave in the selections, giving some new players who don't get often, the chance to start to, go out and give 110%. And I don't think any of the fans would have a problem with losing or drawing if you see players, sprinting and getting back and giving everything. But we're just not seeing it. So I don't really want to criticize Lundberg too much, but I think if he had been bolder with the selection, it could have given us maybe that balance that we're looking for.
Before we move on to Matt, I just want to give a shout out to people in the chat box. Please make sure you comment in all evening. There will be time for questions at the end. Wilson is in there. Kevin Matthews, Matt Hales, Chris Warner. There's a lot of people discussing who you want to be the next manager. And don't worry, that is definitely going to be a topic that comes up, especially considering some of the news that is coming out over the weekend. And especially, I mean, we're going to talk about an individual in Marcelino that I know would have not have excited too many of you, it's fair to say, this weekend. Webby, feeding on from what Tom said there, I kind of want to discuss that system that we want to see being the front three rather than a front two. And in the second half, Freddie made the change. He took off Willock, which was what everyone wanted, and he brought on Pepe, arguably the front three that we should have seen start. And that first 10 minutes where we got the goal was arguably some of the best football we've played in the last 10 games that we've had so far. That pure, solid, closed analysis on that 10 minutes. Why is it then, after we did get the goal back, do you think we didn't have the mental strength to then push on and try and get the winner?
Christ, I don't know the answer to that really, because it's back.
Okay, Raph.
I'd be going to manager of Arsenal because no one else seems to know. The last manager failed. He didn't know. Lundberg doesn't seem to have an answer to it. We're just so fragile. I put it down to our centre backs. Really, I just don't think our defenders have got the mental strength to dig in. David Luiz, I don't actually mind him. He's just not what we need. Holding, I think, is fantastic. He's injured at the moment. I just think we're just too frail. I don't think Xhaka supports the back four well enough. I don't think he's a bad player. I just don't think he, for whatever reason, our CDMs aren't in sync and don't communicate and cover the defence very well. We can be quite rash. We can be quite careless. There's so many problems. It's so hard to put one thing on it. What the one thing I will mention when you said about bringing on Pep and pushing on, I actually thought Martinelli was. I can't believe he's not getting more game time. The guy, it seems absolutely fabulous. Every time I see him, he steps up and seems to be one of the best players on the pitch. So I'm not sure we've got the right starting lineup yet. For me, I've been disappointed with the starting 11 almost every week. So saying that, if we do have the starting lineup that I want tomorrow, I'm still not confident anymore that we'll get the results. We went from 650 to 1 to be relegated 2 weeks ago down to 30 to 1.
Jesus Christ.
Arsenal, 30 to 1 to be relegated. How mad is that? I mean, and it's probably worth a bet, to be fair.
Oh, God. Jesus Christ. Oh, no.
So, I've not got the answer for you, Tom, but hopefully our new manager will.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, Raph, where I want to go next is looking at that next manager. You look at the players that we've got and you've seen what Freddie's been able to do with them in 6 days, and let's be honest, it's not anything, to be honest, really. It doesn't matter if you bring in Allegri, if you bring in Pochettino, even Pep Guardiola. Can you really see them turning around the fortunes we have with this current set of players, especially in that defence?
I do. I think that it may not be that much, but it will be better than what it is now. I think Tom O brought up a good point, and I think it's something that a lot of people have kind of overlooked. Freddie has been there like from the start of the season, and you don't know what impact that's had potentially on the players. You don't know if he's just like they may just need a new pair of eyes, if that makes sense. Somebody looking at it from a slightly different perspective, and that may give people an uplift, just another voice as well. Sometimes when you hear another voice, it's like, I don't know, if you're in workplace and a CEO was sacked and then the deputy comes in, he may just be there steadying the ship, but the problems, they may still see him as part of the quote unquote problem, but somebody new comes in, fresh pair of eyes, a whole different outlook on things may give the players a bit of a boost. I think the main issue is also addressing the balance issue. I think that Emery and Freddie so far haven't got the balance right. So if the balance does improve, I do think that you will see improvements in the team. Like, we're not that bad of a side. We are bad at the moment. Let's not be honest. But if you look at player for player, I think it's a cohesion thing, it's a balance thing, and it's just, especially in transition, I think we're missing key things in our team, like pace and power in defense and in centre midfield. But I think that can be improved. I think defensively, we're going to always have slight issues, I'll be honest, but I think we just got to blitz teams and be attacking and outscore teams, maybe in a way that Chelsea have, and in the way that we used to under Wenger, which would mean that we wouldn't necessarily win the league, but at least would be a competitive side, because at the moment, we're kind of doing neither. Yeah. So I think another team will improve, another coach would improve us, the right coach, but to the extent it's going to need transfers to really kind of get us to where we want to be anyway. So I think that's the issue.
Oh, you could have clipped that and played that on repeat for the last 10 years in terms of it's just transfer. It's just we need that backing. And
but I think the issue is now, sorry to cut you, is I think even then, at least we actually played good football. Our issue was normally we would be dominant, miss loads of chances, and then someone would go up the other end, and our naivety at the back would mean that we would concede goals in games that we probably should have won. Now we're getting bossed like from start to finish. We don't even play good football anymore. So I think it's even worse, to be honest.
Matthew Hudson says in the chat, need a totally new person who won't care about personal feelings and pick based on actual performances. Archie says Arsenal are the only club to change away from power and pace. It's laughable. I mean, Matt picked up on the point, Tom, about Martinelli not getting a chance, and there are players in this team that arguably are being given a chance not really based on merit, and some of those players are having difficult performances and still getting picked. Now, one of those players that had a difficult performance against Norwich was Joe Willock, and he still got picked in the game against Brighton. Now, he was subjected to what I would describe as a missile of abuse from Aubameyang when he misplayed a pass into him. Now, the captaincy has been something that's been discussed for so long this season. It's been such a high-profile issue, basically made out of nothing because of Emery's tactics to how and the timing of when he decided that Granit Xhaka was going to be the original captain. Alba's taken that over, and a lot of people thought that, well, whilst he's a very good player and we desperately need him in this team. In fact, without his goals this season, we would be in the relegation. I saw as a stat, a ridiculous stat, but one that I saw. How do you feel about that situation with him berating a very young player in the way that he did for a pass which wasn't a too easy one to take on?
Yeah, I definitely got flashbacks of Henry shouting at Reyes and some of the other colleagues from back in the day. I mean, you know, he's not quite as much of a diva as Thierry was like in his last days, but, you know, he could edge towards that. I don't think it's right, but he is that type of character. And I think it's just, you know, I don't really want to be, you know, too hypercritical of players in this situation because it's just a poor situation. I think it's good sometimes that players shout at each other so that they do better. But, you know, we don't know maybe if he was supportive afterward, took him to one side and said, look, you know, maybe you should have played the pass, you know, back inside, or, you know, he could have given some other words of advice, which we didn't maybe see behind the scenes. So, and it's probably still too early to kind of get a full view on his impact as a captain, because we've not really won a game, I think, since he probably became captain, or maybe just one game. So, you know, it's still a short period, but, you know, by and large, you know, I think the frustration has just taken over. You know, we saw the situation with Xhaka, you know, reacting to the fans, and, you know, how the club and Emery dealt with that, which was incredibly poor. And, you know, Aubameyang lashing out at a young player who, you know, again, is just making his inroads into the first team in his first real season, you know, as part of the first 11. You know, it's not what we want to see. And, you know, I'm always, you know, the first to be an advocate of supporting young gunners. You know, it's what, you know, makes our club special, that we've got an unbelievable crop of young players, which I think I don't remember in, you know, my supporting history, you know, going back 20, 25, 30 years now, that I remember us having such an amazing crop of youngsters coming through. So as a captain and as a fan base, we should do everything we can to support them. And I feel like, you know, we can be very quick to get on the back of young players, and I just don't buy into that whatsoever. I think, you know, we've seen that, you know, Guendouzi, who came into the team last year, you know, was playing with, you know, lots of confidence and made loads of mistakes, but we could see what he was trying to do. We still got behind him. And in the long run, that will help develop his game. But you can see when we get on the back of players like, you know, Ainsley, Maitland-Niles, if we start getting on the back of Joe Willock, they can shell up and it can really damage their career. So I think generally, you know, again, we've got such big structural issues at the club that, you know, I guess the frustration is just boiling over. And this is what's really, we're just seeing the effects of that. So I think, Aubameyang shouting him is more one of the symptoms. I don't think it's a key flaw in either of the players, but it's just something that, the frustration just has to be dealt with more positively. And I think it's by just freshening things up and going for a new approach.
No, I definitely. Freshening up is definitely key. And speaking of freshening up and sticking with sort of the theme of Aubameyang, Webby, is this news that has broken about the Gabonese striker this weekend that apparently he wants off, and apparently that Real Madrid are interested. And one of the things it was one of those classic Real Madrid transfer links where you're given a couple of their players that aren't really getting minutes, and they're getting put in a sort of a make-weight deal for the player. And this is what has happened with Real Madrid this weekend, is that supposedly they are willing to offer 30 million quid, Dani Ceballos on a permanent, and Luka Jovic as well. Now, I don't really want to get too much into would you take it, because it's in realms of hypotheticals and
take it.
And no, I would as well. But that's beyond the point. Was that when I was thinking about this and thinking about the importance of Aubameyang and how important he is, and he's hugely important. But when I was thinking about it, I don't think I'd be too upset. Like, I don't think it would really affect me, like seeing other players. Like, there's players that have left that have like Santi Cazorla more recently that affect me a lot more, that hasn't arguably given as many goals as someone like Aubameyang, but just the way that he played for the club with full commitment, and he clearly wanted to be there. And for me, I think that Arsenal are lacking in identity, because there are too many players that would too happily leave Arsenal, in my opinion. How would you feel about Aubameyang leaving? And are you sort of on a similar plane to my feelings?
I wouldn't care if the whole team got up and left. I'll be honest, I couldn't care less. I love Aubameyang. Aubameyang's brilliant. Look, he's carrying us at the moment. I get that. He's banging in goals. Without him, we'd probably be rock bottom. But I'm sorry, like we're not winning. We're getting close to a relegation battle. So what does it matter? It's not like we're all high flying, and if we lose him, we're suddenly not going to be competing. We're not going to be, winning. Competing for the Champions League and stuff. Christ, we couldn't be further away at the moment. So at this present time, it doesn't bother me whatsoever who leaves and who stays. Who leaves, who stays, because it's all about building on for the future. If it hasn't worked out with Aubameyang for whatever reason, then let's move on and let's try and get some money back for him, and let's try and reinvest that money. We won't. Kroenke will take it and spend it on something else. But still, let's try and bring someone else in. Let's try a new different direction. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't. I did like Dani Ceballos. I actually I'm not overly convinced anymore along them lines, so I don't know whether keeping him would be brilliant. He has shone great in a few games and made me think that he's wonderful, but I'm not even sure about that anymore. So look, if it's the right deal for the club, then let the new manager decide on that. But I'm not sure whether Aubameyang. I don't think Aubameyang's a really one club man anyway. Look, he's a great, fantastic player. Is he the most loyal player in the world? Probably not. And that's not a detriment to him. Loads of players are like that. So if we've rinsed some fantastic football out of him, and we've got, he's gone as far as he can with the club, then let him move on. Let's get the deal done. Let's get him. He can move on with his career, and Arsenal can move on. It's not going to get any worse, lads. It'd be great watching us in the Championship. We'll win a few games. We might even go back.
I'd like to make a quick point, and I hate to look at the enemy for this point, but I would say Tottenham's two best ever players in Luka Modric and Bale were sold to Real Madrid from their team. And they got to the Champions League final last year. Having a team which competes isn't necessarily about individuals. I think it's about having a team and having a style of play, which is much more important. And I think, when I look at our team, the makeup of the team, when I look at Ozil, when I look at Aubameyang, these guys look like finishing touches, right? They're the guys that you get to just take you to the next level, to maybe win the league of La Liga again, or to compete in the Champions League, to try and get to the semi-finals or finals. These are the quality players you bring in as the finishing touches. I don't think you build teams around these guys. And I'm not, again, I am as much of a Tottenham hater as anybody else, but they lost two fantastic players in easily the history of Tottenham. They sold them, and even when some of the other players they brought in afterwards who didn't perform, they got rid of them. So I think Arsenal, we've always had a case of we bring in a player and we just can't seem to turn them over quickly enough. I look at footballers we should look at them more like they do in American sports, where players get traded all the time. Doesn't mean they're a bad player. You saw that with Odell Beckham, for example, when he got traded in the off season. He's a fantastic player, but it just wasn't right for the team, and they wanted to get somebody else in. So I think Aubameyang's a fantastic striker. His record speaks for itself over the last 5 years, but he could turn another team into a Champions League winning side. But is he going to get us into the top four? Maybe not. So in some of these deals can be beneficial for all parties involved.
That point about the Gareth Bale fit and the Luka Modric thing and being ruthless with the squad, I think is very apt. And a lot of people get very, very attached to players and very, very attached to the idea that, oh God, we can't let them go. Often because they don't want to see those players play for someone else. And it's a horrible attachment, association with those players. But the point where you said that Spurs brought in certain players, and looking through those players, I remember Soldado came in for I think he was their record signing at the time, and then he was sold because he did nothing. Nasa Chadley, Etienne Capoue they got rid of. Eric Lamela was only the one of the ones that was kept, along with Christian Eriksen. Vlad Kirikesh, I think, was one of them as well. Getting rid of those players and being ruthless with the squad when they needed to has improved things. And it's the reason why they were able to get where they were. And it was cohesiveness. And I don't like talking about, as you said, it's horrible to talk about that lot in this way. But sometimes you need to swallow your pride, and sometimes you need to be a bit real and realise that there are examples across the league and across Europe that make sense. And a lot of people turn around and said that signing people that are unknown often gets a lot of stick. Now, I want to move on to talking about the coach side of things before we look ahead to West Ham. Yes, Webb.
Before we move on to that, can I just flip that question on its head to you three and tell me if you was siding with Aubameyang now, so if you was Aubameyang's agent or if you was Aubameyang, would you want to still play for Arsenal? Would you be actively looking to get out of the club? With a man of that talent, if it was me and that was my career, I probably would be.
Because of his age and he wants to play in the Champions League, yes, it makes complete sense. Yeah,
I think he's always said as well, if it is Real Madrid, they're actually going for him. His granddad, it was like a promise that he made to his granddad before he died or whatever. So if it is Real Madrid, he's definitely going to want to go. That's just I don't really blame him, if I'm completely honest.
A lot of fans get sort of this attachment, like they look at the players as if they're Arsenal fans sometimes, and they forget that they're not. They're employees and they're paid, and football isn't like it was 30 years ago. And sometimes it's tough to deal with. Tom, do you want to just give a response to
also, I've just got this awful feeling, and I woke up with it this morning because I was looking at some Arsenal bits and pieces, and I was like, I swear Aubameyang's situation, when I read that news story, he could just turn into another Sanchez or Ozil situation where, has a great season. He looks like our main guy. The team's falling apart. We do everything we can to keep him because that's what we think we need to do. Put him on a bumper contract so he can buy a few more LaFerraris, and then he just chills out. And then he's on a bumper contract to his, mid-30s or maybe till he's 34, and he just doesn't put in the effort. Now, I don't think he's like those guys, and he is a direct striker, but is there a chance that could happen with him? I think for sure. And we really don't want to go down that road because we saw the effect it had on the team with Ozil. We saw the effect it had on the team with Sanchez. And I really don't want Oba to be that guy because I really do like the guy.
I think that when you look at players and the way that, I don't know if you saw this, Liam Brady, you mentioned Ozil, the way Liam Brady went at Ozil, and it came out on Twitter. I think it was on was it Premier Sports? I think it was on that channel. And I agree with a lot of what he said, but it's just sort of this vitriolic way that we are going at our players, and that is obviously been built up over a lot of years and a lot of frustration. But still segueing into this next conversation about the coach side of things is that I still see so much arrogance amongst Arsenal fans that are expecting so much from a club that has fallen so much and is not in the same position that it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that sort of has led to this huge, every single time you see these ITK accounts or the big accounts linking us with a manager, if it's someone that's maybe not necessarily heard of or known of that greatly or has been managing at a lower level or someone like that, the unbelievable replies to these tweets are ridiculous. And Raph, I want to talk about Marcelino. And I don't know how much in the know you are about the Spanish manager. He was at Villarreal, did very, very well. Took a bit of time off, went to Valencia, and again did quite well. And some people would say that he was unceremoniously sacked from that job. Valencia has a very odd structure at the top. Jorge Mendes obviously involved heavily. Peter Lim there too. And when we were linked to him, whilst trust me, he doesn't excite me like other manager names do, but the response by the fan base to Marcelino has been absolutely horrific. What do you sort of put this all down to?
I think it's a couple of things. It's ignorance and it's arrogance. Obviously, with Marcelino, he's very similar to Emery in terms of his in terms of the clubs that he's gone to and stuff like that. So the way that he's gone. So it's easy for people to immediately think that he's just another Emery, if that makes sense. Even though their styles are different, and they're just different managers. I think we're obsessed with managers that we know. I think it's a Premiership issue, to be honest. Where if you look at all of the big clubs, and you look at Barcelona, for example, Valverde was Athletic Bilbao manager. He wasn't somebody that was well known. They had Tata Martina. They're linked with Gallardo, Koeman, Ten Hag. If Valverde leaves, they don't go for the stellar, quote unquote, big name manager. Even Pep himself came from their youth team. And I think that if we did the same thing, I think there'll be an outcry. You look at it, has to be kind of these sexy managers, like, okay, for example, a Simeone. And everyone talks about, okay, we'd get a Simeone, even though Simeone is like almost the polar opposite of a Wenger or Arsenal's kind of archetypal manager, in a sense that in the way that we would play. And that way it would probably take 3 years just for him to get a side that would be able to play in the way that he wants potentially. And would we be happy with, I don't know, 3 more years of pain just for him to get the style of play that he wants, and ultimately may not breed success anyway? But I think it's just an ignorance around and an arrogance around Arsenal in that, and the fan base, in that we need to have these managers that are of the highest caliber. I'm not too fussed about it being a name. It could be an unknown person. I mean, Wenger was unknown. I remember at the time we were linked with Johan Cruyff, I believe. And obviously we got Wenger and everyone was like, what? But I think we just need a manager that has a clear idea of what he wants to do, how he wants to achieve it, and plays. To me, I want a manager that plays good football and is able to kind of preach out or play with the philosophy that Arsenal are now synonymous for, but also obviously breeds better results. If that is Marcelino, then fine. We don't have to go for, I don't know, an Allegri or one of those type of managers. It could be a young, progressive manager who has a clear idea of what he wants to do, and it fits within our style and our players. The fan base, there's a clear outcry for this big manager that's going to come on his white horse and save the day. But I just think we have to just be a little bit more understanding of, you know, these managers, and maybe do a bit of research and not just look at, because example, Emre came out to be wrong, and if you look at his record was technically a good record, you know. And when we did get him, nobody was talking about the fact that when he was at Sevilla, he never won an away game in his last season, or people weren't looking at that. The only thing they were talking about was the 3 Europa Leagues. He won in PSG, or they said, oh, well, PSG is a Mickey Mouse league, that doesn't count. But it was never about actually really doing some research around, is this manager going to be good or not? So sometimes the outcry and the disappointment is just based on the fact that we want this super manager that's supposed to come in and all our problems will be solved.
When it comes down to talking about, when people talk about Liga as a Mickey Mouse league, now I've gone on considerable record to say that I'm not the biggest fan of Liga, and I feel like it's one of the biggest feeding grounds for talent across Europe. And so for me, that's more of a compliment to the league's coaching and youth development. But there are instances where coaches come out of that league and do quite well. You look at Lucien Favre at Borussia Dortmund. This season, maybe it's not going as well they thought, and towards the end of last season as well. But I think he did improve them after Thomas Tuchel left. It was a different style. They promoted more youth, but kept sort of established players like Marco Reus in there, and did really well with that. But there are some times where people get attached to other managers and coaches because of their connection to the club more so than their name. And Tomo, in terms of Patrick Vieira, that's been another name that has been linked very heavily with Arsenal this weekend, and even some outlets have gone to say that even the likes of Edu is really pushing for Patrick Vieira to be that choice for us. Now, he's not done that great in Nice, and in fact, if you guys listening want to go get some insight on Patrick Vieira, we did a managerial tactical breakdown on him with French Football Weekly's Jeremy Smith. That's on the channel. You can go and check that out. And in that video, Jeremy Smith talks rather criticising of Patrick Vieira and how he's done, and it's not been great. Tom, how do you, or rather, do you think that fans sometimes overlook maybe a manager's or coach's qualities simply because of his connection to the club?
Yes, I think I watched that video, which the analysis on Vieira, and it was a great video. And you can see there's obviously quite a few mitigating circumstances around, you know, his successes or lack thereof, you know, this season. He obviously did a lot better last season. But I think, you know, this kind of leads on to, you know, I think Arsenal as a fan base, as in a club, I do think we are a little bit arrogant. And I still think we have delusions of grandeur. Like, you know, we're back in 2004, 2002, was just, you know, bossing everyone. And, you know, we've got the best manager in the game. We've got the best players in the game. You know, I think we need to really look at ourselves as a club and as a fan base to see where we really are, and create a new identity. And we really need to let go of a past. You know, I thought it was quite interesting during the summer where I think it was, you know, part of the management team, I'm trying to remember who, was it Kroenke or maybe it was Vinay, who said, you know, or I think it was actually Rao who said, you know, we have a Champions League budget, but the Europa League team essentially is all we have. And I just think we need to readjust, realign to where we are and basically start again. And the thing about hiring a manager, it's you never know what's going to happen. Does it really work if a player or a manager has a connection or affinity to the club? I think what's really missing is not having a manager who has a link with Arsenal, but I think having more of the ex-players, more of the people who actually love and know the club around the club as a board level, in the board level, around in the background, you know, coaching, to kind of basically bring back to the youngsters and to the players currently what it is to be an Arsenal player. I think that's really what's missing as a club. So essentially, it doesn't really matter who the head coach is. It's more the culture of the club which is missing. Because as you see, all the top teams in Europe, you know, they cycle through coaches every 2 or 3 years, but their identity and their style of play remains, and it still continues. So for me, it's, you know, I think when I'm looking for a new manager, I mean, I think Vieira would probably do a good job. Like, we know he does, you know, he's a tough manager. We know what he was like as a captain. obviously being a great player doesn't mean that you'll be a great manager, but I do think you'd probably do well. I think, looking at his results this season, it's very easy to say, oh, he's terrible. But, Allegri, for example, who would be another Rolls-Royce choice of a manager, he has, an asymmetrical, advantage in the Italian league. We don't really know how he would do in the Premiership. Saying that Italian managers tend to do well in the Premiership. So we never really know. I think what's more important is to get the identity of the club back, realise where we are. I think, having a slice of humble pie would go down a long way with some of the people on the board and some of the management. And, that should really be factor as part of their process in that, we've messed up, we've bought some bad players, we've not really taken care of things, but let's get the spirit of the club back. And you want the new coach to really embody that new spirit, I think, more than anything, because, we do have a phenomenal fan base, one of the most supported clubs in the world. And so I think you see how the effect of Klopp, how he galvanized, he just got what Liverpool is about. And it's kind of, he probably had an advantage because, their fan base is not dissimilar to Dortmund's, but he got it and he galvanized it. And it's very important that the next coach can galvanize the support of the fan base, but also get what the club is, the essence of the club. And I think we definitely need to do a bit of soul searching to really remember what that is. And hopefully that can be as, used as some of the criteria to find the next coach.
Building on from that then, Webby, because as Tom says, that we need to find a manager that's going to come in and galvanise the fan base. Now, I agree that we have one of the, if not the most passionate fan bases on the planet. And that's very obvious because whilst I disagree with a hell of a lot of things I see on social media from Arsenal fans, I have utter respect for their love and passion for this team, hence why they have in some cases, extreme views about things. Now, I struggle with the idea that a coach can come in and galvanize the club as a whole and connect the fan base in a positive way rather than the negative way that we saw Emery unfortunately have to endure, simply because I feel that with any sort of period of time under a coach, there is going to be a period where it drops. You may get the new manager bounce. You may have a period where a team go on some really fantastic form. But even like Frank Lampard is seeing in the current run of fixtures he's having right now, there is going to be a slump. And I just feel that if you mirror Chelsea's situation that they're in right now, if that was in the case going on with Arsenal, I feel that the manager, the coach, would be getting nowhere near the support that Lampard would be getting, irrelevant of his connection to the club. Just in the same way that if a coach, whoever they were, no matter their personality or their reputation, if there was a dip for however long, I think it would quickly capitulate in terms of fan support, fan view, and fan opinion.
It's true. Yeah.
What do you think, Webster?
First of all, I thought Tomo's sort of analogy and words on the new manager and what that's going to do for the club was spot on. Definitely, in order to really mould the club into and shape it how we want it to be, which is no easy ask when it comes down to hiring a manager that's going to do that. Which is why we were so blessed with Wenger, especially in his early years. What I think of that, Matt, I think you're definitely right. I got to be honest. I love all you Arsenal fans. I'm a massive Arsenal fan. A lot of people know me. Everyone watching this, everyone writing here on the chat, all obviously massive Arsenal fans. But we are honestly, our fan base. That's such hard work. That's our work. No one can ever, just reading on all the comments, no one can agree on anything. Everyone, we end up having a massive brawl amongst ourselves after about 5 minutes.
We have one of the most docile audiences, and we still get the old. And
I'm not going to badmouth any Arsenal channels or anything like that.
Go graffiti anywhere or anything.
I try and embrace all of that stuff. There's some really good information that comes out of it. But I mean, Christ, you've only got to watch and look over Twitter and see some outrageous stuff that people say. And so, no manager's going to come in and really get everyone on their side. I think it's nigh impossible, and maybe a lot of clubs like that. Maybe Arsenal are just touching the limelight, or maybe it's just that I focus in on it because I'm an Arsenal fan. That I see the hypocrisy of what our fan base, says on a weekly basis, a daily basis. But it's a tough ask, guys. It's a really tough ask. I really don't know I don't even think the club knows who the manager's going to be at the moment. I think we couldn't be further away from getting the right pick. The bookies definitely don't know, and normally they've got the finger half on the pulse. So watch this space. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a really hard thing to get right. I can't get my head around the idea of seeing a coach come in and getting given the time under this fan base to really connect and really get given that chance. Because one of the other and the last sort of manager I wanted to sort of mention was our coach is Arteta, because he's the other one that's been put to the forefront of people's heads. A lot of people in the chat, I can see you were saying no to Arteta, and it's one of those where he's sort of unknown, and we've been there before with Arsene Wenger, or Wenger as Matty's on today. But in terms of sorry, mate, in terms of actually thinking about someone who is not as known, who you can't sort of analyze. I mean, it'd be really hard for me to do a managerial tactical analysis on him. I could go and get a Man City fan journalist, but without really seeing them take charge of a game and their coaching style and what they're really trying to do, we really, really couldn't come up with a judgment. So I don't think that anyone can really go out there and say categorically no, that he is the wrong choice. It would be ridiculous to bring him in, because we just don't know. We just don't know what it would bring to the club. It could be disastrous. It really could. But what I do like about it is more of a mystery. Now, some people have highlighted to me that it is the wrong time to take a risk at Arsenal. Maybe after Arsene Wenger, we could have gone with our Arteta at that moment because it was a better time to do it. And now we need someone to come in with a real personality and a real sort of stranglehold on what they want from a club and what they want from the players they're going to sign. But I just wanted to sort of round off this manager section by mentioning Arteta in that way as we look ahead to how our current coach might deal with the next challenge that is ahead of us. So with the last 8 minutes or so of the pod, Raph, let's cover West Ham, because Freddie is in a really difficult scenario right now. The fans aren't happy, but he's also got, on the flip side, sort of this nice limbo situation for himself where he hasn't really got much more to lose right now. He's not got a win so far. He's not picked up more than the single point he got at Norwich. But what he does know is that he knows what the fans want. They want to see Pepe starting. They don't want to see a front two. And they probably don't want to see a couple of our centre-backs being persisted with. How do you see Freddie approaching this match at the London Stadium?
I think it's going to be more of the same, to be honest, because he may play Pepe. That may be the only real change, but he knew this before. I think that I think Arsenal as a club I think sometimes to their detriment, they're trying to go away from the whole social media thing to the point where it's almost like they want to do the opposite of what quote unquote fans want, because they think, oh, you lot don't know what you're talking about, kind of thing, like we know. So it almost feels as though they almost are even more stubborn than they need to be at times, because the reality is everyone's been crying out for Pepe. Everyone wanted, the front three and then Ozil to play. It seemed like the most obvious thing, but he's gone away from it twice. So I don't see him deviating much from that. I mean, you could say Kolasinac has been the only one out of the surprise inclusions that has played quite well. So I don't think that will change. I think the centre-backs is more out of there being no one else. I think Holding, they're saying, has got a bruised knee, which is why he hasn't been in and around the team. Obviously, Mustafi was a bit of a train wreck against Norwich in the second half. So apart from Chambers, where else can he really go? And that's only one space when ideally we probably want both of them to be out of the team. So apart from Pepe maybe taking Willock's place, I don't really see what else he's going to do. I think I think he could maybe have. He's got enough time now to at least have improved the way our patterns of play. And I don't honestly see how it's going to be much different. I don't know. The Brighton game really disappointed me. I'll be honest. The Norwich one was understandable because it was only a day. So you could say he hadn't really had time to really train with the whole squad. I think a lot of people didn't train because of the game on the midweek game. But the Brighton game really disappointed me. So I just don't envisage a change in the way that we play that much and in a change in personnel. I just think that they have to speed up the managerial, the coach process. I think it's really a bit of a shambles that they've taken this long, considering the fact that they was getting rid of Emre. Like we've kind of spoke about, this is almost becoming like a Spurs podcast, but they got rid of.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
They got rid of Potts and hired Mourinho the next day. We're still like, we've got 12 candidates or whatever they're saying. Nobody really knows. It seems like the board don't really know. And I just think the longer it lingers, I think the worse it's going to get. I went to the West Ham game away last season. And for me, it's probably easy to say now, but that was the game when I thought, Emre doesn't know what he's doing. We don't know how we play. We don't know what's going on. And I just think now we're even in a worse position. And I think they're going to be up for the game. They're going to know that we're there for the taking. And I just think if it gets to half an hour and we're not playing that well, it could get really, really toxic. And players are starting to show it as well. They look a little bit nervous with everything they do. I think that's why more mistakes are coming. And I just think that I just don't see much changing, if I'm honest. I think the best we can hope for is probably a draw.
Yeah, it's funny because on the show that I did this morning with Roshane Thomas from The Athletic, previewing this game, which you can check out because if you're watching on playback, I'm going to put it in the description. But talking to Roshane, he said that he had it on as a 0-0 draw. Like it was the most nailed on 0-0 draw he'd ever seen. And
none of us can defend.
The thing is, I slightly disagree because the fact that neither team can defend. If anything, it's got goals galore all over it. But the other side of things is neither of us can really take their chances right now. And West Ham have got their own problems too. Tomo, in terms of sort of, Raph touched on it, sort of, no team fears Arsenal right now. Not a single team has a right to fear Arsenal. And any team can come up against us thinking that they can get something out of it. But do you think Arsenal's biggest problem beyond their defensive capabilities, beyond their lack of taking chances, is the mentality that they're so concerned about the opposition that they never really focus on what they need to do themselves?
Look, I'm just going to be blunt. I don't think that's it at all. I just think we're not very good.
And that's fair enough.
Yeah, I think the Premiership game has moved on. And I think we've spent a lot of time looking internally at our clubs and looking across Europe and, scouting networks and whatnot. But we've not really spent a lot of time focusing on what's going on in the Premiership. And, I think, we're physically very weak. I think we're athletically not peak. When you match up our players man for man, in terms of, and some of these stats I don't think can come across in, because, we look at, when we're looking at like maybe stats DNA, looking at the analysis when you're trying to sign players, it doesn't maybe look at like acceleration, like strength, how high they can jump, how they compete for certain stuff. And I just feel like every Arsenal match, and it's not since the start of last season, is basically like an FA Cup round, because it's every match has to be a battle. If Arsenal don't play, get lucky with the goals or play good football, they're not going to win matches because we don't compete very well in the duels. So that's why I do fear quite a lot for this season, is because we just don't match up to a lot of teams. And, it's strange for me to see, other teams have taller, bigger, stronger, quicker centre-backs and midfielders than we do. So, instead of just what we used to have back in the day, we would just, roll up, and steamroll through teams. Either in our physical days back in the early 2000s or in the 2010s, and we actually had a really nice style of football. Right now, you saw in the game against Brighton, we couldn't match them in possession. Athletically, we couldn't keep up with them. Obviously, we had that short little bounce at the start of the second half, but we just couldn't keep up. And so for me, that is a really, really worrying sign that we spent the whole season, and I look at lots of other, broadcasters and Twitter and YouTubers, and, they're all, we're shouting who should play. But for me, none of them are really that good. Let's be honest, like objectively speaking, in terms of actual physical attributes, let alone the technical. And you can see the technical's not there. So that's why we struggle in basically every single game. There's no game there's no, gimme games anymore. And so you see that across the Premiership that, anyone can beat anyone. But I just feel like we've not kind of read that and got and understood that and then integrated that into our team. And I think another point which also, while we seem to struggle a lot, is that when we do bring in players, we rarely sign players from other Premiership teams at the peak age. Obviously, I'm going to exclude Silvestre and David Luiz and some of these kind of, and Petr Cech.
The ones that don't even mention
it. The obvious ones. But basically, like, when I look at Liverpool and you look at their team, you look at Robertson, you look at Trent Arnold, you look at Van Dijk, you look at Wijnaldum, a great signing from Newcastle. You saw Tottenham picked up Sissoko. These are the kind of players we should have had on our bench. But so the thing is, when you see other players in lower teams who are performing week in, week out, you already know I feel like there's a better chance of them hitting the ground running. And even going back, to their strike force in terms of Mane and then Salah, they have that Premiership readiness. And I feel like when we're looking maybe in the January transfer window and, looking and, in the summer, we really need to kind of look, how can we bring in some players from the league to kind of bring that competitive edge back to Arsenal? Because when you bring in a guy from another league, you don't know what he can do in the league. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be successful, but it's a bigger risk. And I feel that's why a lot of times, players are coming in, they're not really Premiership ready. So, I don't want to pick out individual players in the team because, we could be here all day. But I think basically our squad is weak physically in the middle of the park and at the centre backs. And I don't even see how we can address that in the short term. So that's why I'm really worried about this December period and how we're really going to get through it, because I don't think there are any easy games. I think we could draw or lose most of those games. I don't see where the victories come from with what Freddie has shown us. Now, if he kind of changes it up and, like I said, get the youth players in and they're going to scrap and fight and basically run around like Martinelli, then maybe we could steal something. But if he keeps playing the same team, I just don't see it.
No, and it's interesting you mentioned about how there's no easy games. And it's something that I've been thinking about recently, that it's completely right in context to say that there is no easy games is 100% right. But you look at Liverpool and you look at City last season and you look at even Leicester and what they're doing to some of the teams. I don't think the quality of the Premier League is as high as what it is on what we perceive it to be, in terms of the teams that really know what they need to do, especially in terms of recruiting the right players. As you said, you talked about Liverpool. They needed a centre-back. They signed Virgil van Dijk. They needed a player to be at the base of their midfield. They signed Fabinho. They needed an energetic midfielder when they signed Wijnaldum. They needed those players and they got them. Leicester went out and ruthlessly got Tielemans on a full-time contract. They spotted talent in Maddison from Norwich and they got him in, keeping hold of Vardy when he could have left for a bigger club in Arsenal, and they kept hold of him. So just signing these players here and there. Pereira from, I believe it was Porto in Portugal when they signed him. Signing the right players because they needed those guys. And Arsenal lack that. But going back to my original point, I don't see the Premier League as this huge bursting full of quality teams, because the top teams who know what they're doing, like Liverpool and Leicester and Man City last season, are struggling this year, blow away those teams. But we don't have that same momentum. We don't have that same mentality because we're so concerned about the other teams. And we, as you say, Tom, we perceive them to have or us to have no easy games. But actually what we should do is we should be working on what we're capable of, not necessarily concerned about the opposition.
Well, I think that's what's made it so frustrating, is that we're not playing to our strengths. So I think most of I'm not saying we need to sign 10 players now, but even with the players that we do have, we don't play to our strengths. So, we've got Martinelli, we've got Reece Nelson, we've got Saka, we've got pace and guys who can do something on the wing, and we don't play them. We've got Tierney, he's not playing. Maybe there's something there about, injury or something, we're not sure. But when I look at what we're good at and what could threaten other teams, it's pace. Yeah. We need pace, and we've got pace in abundance, and we're not using it. Lacazette isn't the paciest guy, and Ozil's not the paciest guy. So we're sacrificing what we're good at to try and get the big stars in. And again, I fully agree with you that we're, when you look at the quality and you look at watching some of the other games today, we can win games if we focus on what we do well. But with Freddie, I just don't see it. So unless he's going to completely change for tomorrow, what he's shown us in the last 2 games, I don't think he's going to be brave and play to our strengths. And, fortune favours the brave. At this point, we might as well have a go. At some point, we might as well just, come on, lads, let's just have a go. And that's what I've been crying out for all season. I think, for me, the Liverpool game, I think, was the big changer for me, where we just didn't have a go. And I was just not used to seeing that from an Arsenal team. Like, setting up, not focusing on any of our strengths, focusing on all the strengths of the opposition. And that's just not Arsenal.
It's not. Well, it might be now, but it wasn't. Certainly. Yeah. Webby, round us off in terms of this West Ham side of things, and then end it with a scoreline prediction. Do you see anything changing tomorrow? Do you think there'll be any impact from the Brighton game? Do you think that the players may have really realised that, we just need to really step things up now, think about ourselves as we've been talking about on here, or do you still think there's going to be an underlying fear of what the opposition can do to us?
Well, before I do that, because I've been silent while these two have been taking the line.
It's a blessing.
It's Webby's man of the match. It's actually man of the chat. I've been reading all these good folk, and I'm going to give my man of the chat award to Archie. I think he's been chatting a lot of sense. Second to Matt Howes. These guys have been filling me with a lot of wisdom whilst I've been listening to you guys. So that's just something separate. We'll make that a new feature moving forward.
Yes, I like it. Taking the initiative. Love that, mate. Brilliant.
About being something new to the team, boys. That's why you get me on.
There was a really, really good comment that I was thinking maybe we should do a comment of the pod or something, and I found out whilst you're giving the prediction, I'm going to scroll back and try and find it.
The pod. And man of the chat, which Archie and Matt for their efforts. But anyway, so to your question, I think we're going to get beat. I think we're going to get beat. What are we even doing? It's 10 o'clock. We should be in bed. I think that they're not going to change a lot. I don't think we're going to get much of a mix-up in the starting lineup. I don't. Nothing against Freddie. I just don't think that Freddie, so far, he hasn't really brought anything new, and I would have expected him to bring something new fairly early on. We're on the 3rd game now, so maybe he's slowly doing it, but I can't really see it. So I think it's going to be a lot more of the same, which means it's going to be a lot more of the same old crap that we see, which means we're probably going to get beat. I actually looked through West Ham's results, and they're not actually that bad. Someone said to me the other day that West Ham are on a horrible run of form, and Arsenal obviously on a horrible run of form, so it's going to be a really good game. But I just looked then, and it didn't look that bad at all. They beat Chelsea. To Wolves. Wolves are a really good team, so the Wolves will beat us as well. They beat Chelsea. They only lost by 1 goal to Tottenham, albeit being 3-0 down. All right, they got trounced by Burnley. But they're scoring goals. They scored goals against Newcastle. They drew to Sheffield United. I think that's better than what we did. So, I don't know, guys. I think that it's going to be a bit of a tough ask, and I suspect, unless we really mix it up, I'd like to see Pepe start. not because he's got a great form at the moment, just because why not? We're losing games, might as well chuck some new blood into the team. I'd like to see Martinelli start. I think if he does, in front of maybe Lacazette potentially, I think that man will score goals. I don't think he's affected by the bad form that we've got. I don't think he's affected by the bad atmosphere and the negativity in the club. I think he's young blood. I think he's embracing it. I think this is playing into his hands. The more Aubameyang wants to leave and everyone's playing rubbish, he's probably sitting there thinking, this is my chance, and he's embracing it. So get these kids on the pitch that are going to embrace the negativity and the bad form, and, you know, let them go out and try and prove a point. Is Danny Ceballos, is he injured at the moment? I've not seen a lot of him.
I think he's going to be out, yeah.
Is he? He was going to be my lineup. That's I'll play him anyway, if he's injured or not. Regardless, it makes no difference. So yeah, I think a draw or loss, guys. I think it's going to take a lot.
I'm going to press you for a score. Give me a scoreline.
To stop the rot and to we're like turning the Titanic at the moment. I'm going to say 2-1 to Hammers. Unfortunately.
Whoa. Okay.
Controversial.
Raph, scoreline, mate.
I think 2-2. I think it'll be an open game, end to end, and I just think I think it'll be 2-2. Obviously, it depends on the lineup that he picks, but I don't even know if it does, to be honest. I think it'll be 2. I don't think we're gonna be able to keep any type of clean sheet. I think Leno's gonna be busy. Yeah, 2-2.
Leno's been an odd pick for fantasy because he never keeps a clean sheet, but he's getting points for those saves. I've been looking at his
Is he?
points.
Oh, yeah. I just never picked him because I thought we never keep a clean sheet, so I'm never picking any goalie or any defender from Arsenal.
I've stuck it out with Edison, but it's been an awful choice. So I've got Henderson on the bench waiting to crop up from.
I got Patricio, man. He's doing all right.
Yeah, he's not bad. Tomo, scoreline, please, fella.
I've got a light in the mood, so I'm going to go 3-2 away win. So, yeah, I'm going to go 3-2. I'm just hoping that he can bench Lacazette. Maybe Lacazette can come on. I still think he's a phenomenal player. But just get Tierney running down. You know, hopefully he can get a game as well. Love to see Martinelli play. I'd actually want to know what Reece Nelson could do, maybe coming off the bench at some point as well. But let's just have a go. At this point, you know, we're so far down the table, we might as well just have a go. So let's hope Freddie's brave and starts Martinelli. Let's hope he gets the midfield balance right. And yeah, we know we're going to concede, but you know, with Pepe playing Martinelli or Aubameyang, they're going to score goals. So 3-2.
Yeah, relegation 6-pointer. We are only 4 points off the drop. I've just checked. That's so bad, isn't it? 4 points off. 30-1, Matt. Get that money in.
Well, I was actually going to ask you a question, Tom. What do you think about getting in a manager now or waiting to the end of the season and because you know there are some really, really exciting names we could get in at the end of the season who aren't available now. So I'm completely stuck because, you know, if we make the wrong choice now, you know, with the okay, yes, there are 12 or so candidates, but there could be some really, really juicy names in the summer. So what's your view on that?
It's a really tough one. I think that had I had seen something different from Freddie in his 2 games, I would have said wait to the end. But because it's so similar and because it's not too much is changing, even in this short space of time, and I'm not expecting a massive boost from just losing Emery, but not even the change in formation, not in the change of lineups, not players getting rewarded when they should do. I'm inclined to employ someone probably during the period where we've got that week off, when there's that sort of Christmas break that we now get, which is where half of the league plays one week and the other half plays the other week. I think there's an opportunity there to get someone in and settle them. I think that there's a chance that you could get, because part of that is now based on the fact that I think a lot of coaches will look at Arsenal and think it's a poison chalice, and will look at it and think that it's not as an attractive prospect as it hell of it used to be. So whilst I might want Marco Rosa from Gladbach, I don't think he'd want to leave Gladbach and go to it. I don't think that Brendan Rodgers had no inkling that he probably would want to go to Arsenal. That's why he signed a new deal. So I'm inclined to go with maybe the less favourable option in a lot of people's eyes and pick someone now. I think there are, as you say, a lot of people available at the end of the season. But I think there are some coaches that are either poachable at the moment or could come in and change things. And some of those may not have even been mentioned in the media yet. But that is where I am sitting. So I hope that answers your question. But,
Tom, there's your comment of the pod.
Where is it?
What London clubs are there in the Championship? Be good, some good derbies for us next year. Brilliant.
Fair play. I was going to quickly run through some of your predictions before we wrap things up, because I want to get some of your comments in here. Arsenal Fan Circle says 1-1. Jouster Donker says 1-1. Archie says 2-1 to the Hammers. Crook, who got the comment of the evening from Webby, says 1-1. Josh Goes Forever says 3-0 West Ham. Lady Legend FIFA says West Ham 2-1. Matthew Hudson says 2-0 to West Ham United, 3-1 West Ham. Unique's going for the Arsenal win. Matt Hale's reckon a West Ham win. Niall says 3-3. It's a mixed bag, but slightly leaning more negatively. I'm feeling that's the sense I'm getting right now. We are going to wrap things up there this evening. Huge thanks to my panel, Webby. Huge thank you, mate, for coming on and introducing a new feature to the podcast, which I like.
Thank you for having me on. Sorry I missed it last week. Thank you for everyone in the comments, keeping me entertained as usual. Good evening.
And I mean, Raph, once again, top class stuff, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks to all the guys as well and the comments.
Yeah, speaking of the comments, thank you for the donation, Michael. Apparently something isn't up with the mic, so maybe a Christmas purchase of a new microphone might be in order. Thank you. I appreciate the donation, Michael. Much appreciated, son. Any donations, always try to get them straight back into the podcast, but I've just moved out. So, if you want to support a guy in need, he's now got to pay a mortgage. You never know. Maybe I'll enjoy it a bit more. And Tomo, I have to say, every single this sort of push to get new debutants on has been easily, I think, the best thing that I've ever done on this channel, because French that came on was great. Raph, you've obviously been fantastic, and Tomo, you've had an absolutely brilliant debut, it's fair to say. I think everyone in the chat box will agree, so thank you for taking the time out of your evening to come on.
No, thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. And remember, it is Christmas, so it is the season of giving. So give to Tom. He's doing a great job. And keep up with the good work. And, hopefully the tactical analysis can brighten up our days in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, fingers crossed. I mean, as I said, moving in this week. So this week, there may be a break from tactical breakdowns, but the following week, once Wi-Fi is up and running, it'll be full steam ahead, analysing the likes of Marcelino and Luka Jovic and all of those names that are... I mean, January's going to be horrific. It's going to be absolutely awful.
You forgot Mbappe. I'm sure we'll be
of course, got to do on Mbappe and Ronaldo, because no one's heard of him, and all of the rest of them. So thank you ever so much.
Shouts out to Archie, by the way.
What's that, Raph?
I said shouts out to Archie. I agree.
Yes. Yeah. What is Archie saying in the chat? Raph wins award. Best host today. Sorry, Webby.
I was the one who gave him the bloody man of the match.
He's been stabbed in the back. Oh, Archie. Oh, that's hilarious. Fair play, mate. You can go follow the boys on Twitter. You can follow Webby at WebbyAFC182. I mean, he's only the one that ever displays on his name because he's so desperate for followers. So go and follow the boy. You can follow Raph at Messi the Artist on Twitter, and Tomo you can find at Quantum_King, I believe it is, on Twitter as well. Again, similar to French, criminally unfollowed for someone who knows their stuff about football. So make sure you go over to Twitter and give the guys a follow, or just unfollow Matt for if you want to give him a little bit of her. Only joking. Go and follow all the guys. We will see you again very, very soon. I'll be live straight after the game on Monday evening at the West Ham London Stadium. So, oh my God, here we go again. One more game. Let's see if we can get 3 points. Fingers crossed. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Give it a like, subscribe if you're new around here with notifications turned on so you never miss a show. And we will see you again very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.